and we've got some interesting things we're going to show you with, let's see.
Okay, we're ready. 2, 3. PowerShell, right? And PowerShell admin.
There's a toggle switch in there. You can have it go either way.
Okay. But anyway, the problem with control panel, I use that a lot. My desktop for it right here, so I don't really miss that on the menu here.
Joe?
Yes.
One thing, there are a lot of nice features in there, unfortunately none of which I use. But I do like the start menu, which will call that up. So that is not called up by default. To me, cleans up the start menu. And then the other thing is you can put items in one, what do you call it, square?
Yeah.
You can put a number of items, but it's kind of acts like a folder, but it shows all the names of the items on the square. So they're working towards getting you a folder but those are the two things that can help you clean up the start menu a little bit.
Good. Icon version of the start menu, I just use the programs over here.
I usually just wind up hitting the start button and typing in enough letters to make it unique.
That'll work.
Faster than searching around for it.
Yep. But you've got internet search turned off on that?
Yeah, I've got it turned off, but you can still, if you just tap it and type what you're looking for, it'll pop up to the top of the list. You can choose it.
You still have internet search turned on then or off?
Off, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if with it turned on, I've tried this search here several times, and it right away gives me a dozen internet sites that are no good to me, that have no value. So
When you set it up, it says something about if you turn it on, it'll be more thorough but take a lot longer or something to that effect.
of course, then there's everything. Any of you guys used everything? A tool that I downloaded. And when you first turn it on, tools, I don't have it on here. It lists everything on your computer. I mean everything. So if you type in let me see if I can get it on this one here. Everything. So if I start put something in the search bar up here and I start talking about, well, let's just say pictures. It'll got everything with the word pictures in it on your computer. And so if you're looking for something real quick, this thing's a way to find it real quick without getting on the internet. Just make all of its reference points, but once you get it on there, I could type anything in here and it'll go looking for it.
Does it automatically?
Anyway, that's one of my favorites, and I use it a lot. I cleaned up a couple of my on the. Let me get disk management. At home, I had several computers, and they all had system reserve and OEM reserve and 2 or 3 extra blocks in there. And I've gotten rid of all of them except this one here. You've got an EUFI BIOS this is not, you don't want to do that. You don't want to get rid of the system reserve, or the system reserve box.
Up your mic a little bit.
Up my mic?
Very well.
Is that any better?
Mine or his?
Is that any better? Back up your system. Either clone it or image it. And I would recommend image these days over clone. So, what else? Any questions? None whatsoever. Wow. Yeah.
Joe, you were going to show me how to move my partitions over with using Aegis, I think you
No, I like AOMI partition.
Aomi?
AOMEI. This one right here. AOMEI.
I thought we downloaded it. I'm just looking for it on my, see if I have an icon.
I think we did download it.
Yes.
And that'll help you get rid of partitions you don't want. You know, like you've got an OEM partition there that restores your system back to the way it was the day you bought it. I don't think anybody wants that. At least not me. This thing's 9 years old and it's got a lot of stuff added that was never on a machine when I bought it. So
That mean, Joe, on the first partition, what does the number mean?
that's not a number, that's an S.
Oh. Oh, mine are numbered. I have 3 partitions like that, and they're numbered 1, 1, and 4.
One what?
1, 1, and 4.
No. Go to disk management then. See, the problem is, what I like about AOMI, it gives you what you see is the relative size of the partition on the disk. Like you say, these two make up, 95% of the disk. They get 95% of the space. This little guy here is just showing up that you just can't see it. So if you put your right click on it and take a look at it, you still don't learn a lot. So I use Microsoft's disk management for that. Now it shows that S you saw was for system reserve.
Actually, it's the 5 for 500, isn't it?
Well, I think it was the S, because that's the top line. That's normally what they read. Could be the 5 for 500. You could be right. Could be the 5 for 500. Yes. But that's 500 megabytes in a 500 gig hard drive. That's not an awful lot of space to worry about.
Joe, my first partition under disk management said it's a 451 megabyte unallocated.
Okay, that you can just flat delete and then go in there and merge to the C partition.
What do I do to merge the C partition? What program do I use? Disk management?
No, the one you got right there.
Or
Now, see, first you want to do is you want to delete the initial partition. Is it a partition or is it just a black space?
but it says unallocated.
It's system.
So it is system reserved then?
Yeah, if it says system reserved, system, click
Just
on
says
it.
system.
System partition.
If it says it's a system partition, that means it's got all the boot instructions. So you got that's a special case.
And the other one is system recovery, so it's
That one just don't care. That one's the one you can delete because you're not going to recover back. That takes you back to day one on the machine. So all the things you've done to it will not be available now within. Okay. Now, we used to be able to move those partitions around and take those and put them wherever you wanted, but I haven't seen that available in Windows 10. I'm not even sure it was available in Windows 7, but I know in XP we used to do that, and in okay. Anyway, for moving partitions around and deleting and renaming them, I think Aomi is probably one of the better ones out there for free. I know we tried EZA's partition manager, and that would not do as much as Aomi did. So that's out. Okay. Any other questions? Any other topics? None, okay. Okay. We were going to go into cloning and imaging, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside. Okay. Anybody getting a new laptop soon? I'm starting to look. Like I say, this one here is 9 years old, and it's been great, but it doesn't have USB 3, and it doesn't have a few of the other things that I want. And so I've started making myself a list of the things that my new computer has to have to be considered. And surprisingly, 4K is not on my list of things it has to have. Because, you know, I'm getting too old to worry about 4K. I can't see the difference on them anyway. Like I can look at Nick's machine, who it is 4K, and look at mine, and I can't really tell the difference in resolution. So that's not high on my list. I do want USB 3 and a few other things. I want a solid state hard drive, but I don't want a 256, I want at least a 500. Gil's back?
Well, not 100%, but I'm here.
Okay.
Had to eat right quick. Okay. Now then. Thanks everybody for your patience. Appreciate, Joe, what you were doing. We can't emphasize that enough. Whether you clone, image, or backup, it always needs to be done. JB.
What is the name of that program? Would you spell it? Aomi or whatever it is?
Aomi Partition Master? Or
Partition
Assistant. Sorry. Aomi Partition Assistant. Let me flip over here to
Spelled
another computer.
AOMEI.
I think I've got a link up on BuildOrBuy for it. Let me take a look. Yeah. In the talking points for today, number 72, Aomi Partition Assistant. Aomi Partition Assistant, that's what we were using last week talking about. That's what Joe was just talking about today. Some things you just cannot do with disk management in Windows. Some things you've got to have somebody else's tool, a third-party tool, and that is a great little tool. I remember back when Aomi first contacted us about their tools and asked us to take a look at them. We should spend some more time doing a full user experience with those products. That's something we might do in the future. Some of those things we sort of, take for granted. We should never take any of this for granted, especially with Microsoft and what they're doing monkeying around with us. So, it's number 72 in the talking points for today. I got an email, and I just found out from Dwayne, and this is interesting. Funny how things go full circle. The best free video editing program. This is from TechSupportAlert.com, and it is on Gizmo's freeware. Best free video editing program, and I believe it is DaVinci Resolve. What's curious is DaVinci Resolve has just upgraded, and the new version of it is in beta. You can try the beta, but I would suggest wait. But what I have read on some of the comments about the new program, the free version works with some of the paid controllers, but the free version does what most people want to do, and it also runs 10 times faster. So, I'm pretty satisfied with the way the program works as it is right now, but if it runs 10 times faster, it's not comparing apples and apples if I build a RYZEN and put the new version of the DaVinci Resolve on, and I'm saying, wow. So I've got to have the same version of DaVinci Resolve on the old FX machine and on the new RYZEN machine, then see what the performance is, then I'll say, wow. But I think it's interesting that I got that from Dwayne. I thought that was curious. I've got a link up on BuildOrBuy as well for that y'all can take a look at. I'm not sure which one it is in there, but it's in the list. So I appreciate Dwayne sending that because it is a great video editor. My concern was my workflow has always been MP4, but because we're using Canon XA35s, I can use an MP4, which is every 30 minutes. You got a new file, 33 minutes and some seconds. Or I can do the AVC HD, which is an MTS file. So my question to Blackmagic was, when I downloaded it last time, one thing I would like to see as an update, not only will it just import an MTS file out of a Canon camera, but I want to hear audio. Otherwise, I've got to take that file into another program, convert it, before I can bring it in DaVinci Resolve and edit it. I want the audio and the video. And the Canon XA35 is a great camera. Love it, love it. We're using one XA35, two G40s, and a Canon Vixia 600 right now. Good cameras. So let's go back over to the talking points. I wanted to start at the top of the list, and we built a couple of machines. Lou Warren's machine. I'll minimize this for just a second. Lou Warren built I built for Lou, a RYZEN 1700, and then of course I said last week, because of some of the changes I was going through, I was going to build a RYZEN 1800X, and I had to change the case. And it's a funny thing, we always talk about you change one thing, it changes everything. Building this computer was like building a watch. Building this computer was like building a watch. Everything just fits. I've got a Corsair case with a Corsair cooler, and I'm impressed. I had a Corsair case one time, and I said I didn't really care for it and wasn't eager to get another one because, it was like building a watch. The way the radiator fit in there with the fans and the way all that fit together, and then getting the motherboard in and putting the power connectors on that motherboard at the top. If I wanted to disconnect those power connectors on that motherboard, I've got to pull the motherboard because they're right up next to the radiator. It was like building a watch, but everything works. So far, one thing I found curious, let's go over to that camera. I think it's camera number 4. I've got that with the Corsair cooler, you can see, but I'm going to zoom out just a little bit because that is the MSI titanium motherboard. And there's some interesting technology going on these motherboards. We've talked before about how we get our USB 3.1 on the front of the case. Well, I'm going to see if I can scroll down and show you a connector on this board. And then I'm going to go to a picture online and show you maybe a better view of it. But I'm looking for a connector. It's toward the bottom edge of the board. I'm not sure we're going to see it here, but it'll be on the bottom right. You see the MSI logo. We're going past the video card. We've already gone past the M.2 because it's just under the video card. That's the slot for the second M.2. But there's a connector right on the right. And nope, doesn't show up real good here. Okay, so I'll have to show it to you in a different picture. But you'll also notice I've got one power tap here at the bottom. If anybody's considering this motherboard has 4 power taps. Normally you have 2. You have your 24 pin at the top right. Then at the top for the CPU, you've got your 8 pin. But then there's also another power tap. And then down below is a 6 pin. This power tap, you'll notice I'm not using. If someone were to build this machine, I would strongly encourage you to put probably an 850 watt or bigger power supply. The reason for that is that third power tap. I'm not using it, don't plan on needing it, because I'm not putting in something that goes to a PCI slot that's going to require power, and that's what that's for. But everything else on there that I've got plugged in, I'm happy with. And I've even got the Corsair Link plugged into that USB 2 port. I still have another set of USB 2 ports I can use. And a funny thing about this case, if you notice I've got a speaker plugged in. Cases usually come with a case speaker. This case did not. And last time I bought speakers for a case, I bought 4 because I needed 2. I had 2 spares. I have no spares now. This is not the first case this has happened to. But normally where your wires hook onto the motherboard, that's also where your speaker goes. This, if you'll notice, is in a separate location. To the bottom are the wires that hook up on the front of the case, and way above it where you see that black and red wire, that is where the speaker's at. Long way off. Maybe I can zoom in on that connector right there. Yeah. That connector right there that I'm on, that's as close as I can get. I'm going to take you a picture online. It's right in the center, near the black and red wire. That is a cable connector for the USB 3.1 that would go on the front of the case. Curious enough, you can't buy that product to hook that up. That connector right here. I'm going to show you another picture online that's probably clear. Because MSI partnered with somebody, and in that partnership they made a case, and I'm not saying buy the case, but I'm just saying here's a case. Give me a second while I find it. I'll go to MSI, Digital Trends, MSI, stuff that Dwayne sent us from Hexas about the Optane, MSI, there it is. Number 36 in the talking points. MSI and Fantex launch a front USB 3.1 Generation 2 Type-C solution. I tell you, with all the stuff we go through, I'll hold down the control key, I'll click enter, we'll bring up another tab, and this should show us the press release, and that's the picture. This connector on the left is what's on the motherboard. And this device on the right is what Fantech has come up with to plug into a case. Several weeks ago, we talked about how to get USB 3.1 on the front of a case. Asus, Gigabyte, and what's the other that makes motherboards? Used to make them for Asus.
Aztec?
Was it Aztec or was it, there's another company that made boards for Asus. Anyway, I can't remember the name of it. It'll come to me like a bolt of lightning.
I got one.
And you'll think of it too, Joe. Everybody right now is doing USB 3.1C to the front of the case, but they're occupying the PCI Express. And the PCI Express, if you use the PCI Express, you lose access to some drives, and you're not getting the speed you really want. This connector is the way to do it. MSI is doing it. But you can't get the device to plug on the front of the case. Now, Lee & Lee is also working with a connector to give you USB 3.1 on the front of the case. It will work with some of their cases. It's hard to find. I finally found it. But it's an ongoing process. Now, the case that this is designed for that MSI and Fantex has put together, I have read some extreme reviews, and that Fantech case is not a case I would put money on because of the price. And Fantech is not selling just this item separately by itself. I wish they did. But that's the connector, and that's what it looked like on the front to get the full speed. Anybody else that's doing it through the PCI Express, that's not the way to get the speed. but those are the connectors I've seen. Asus has a drive bay hub, Gigabyte has one, and the other company that I can't think of also has one. But the reason I'm telling you about this, I always say check everything on the motherboard and test it. That's one connector I can't test. Can't test it because I can't get the connector. Now, I have found another company that maybe has a cable that might work, but until I can get a good clear view of it, the cable, I can show you the one at Lee & Lee, the cable, if it plugs into that same connector, almost looks like a SATA cable that's bent, but it's not exactly the same. It looks close. Give me a second. I'll come back over here and I'll show you the link. Let's go in through, let's see, Lee & Lee, the Fantech in through Elite case. You can take a look at it. Expensive case. It's not
ASRock.
ASRock. That's the company. Now, why can't I remember ASRock? We've used ASRock motherboards before, but that just, I don't know why it escapes me. I can always remember the company that made motherboards for Asus. That's weird. Thanks, Joe. Let me find Lee & Lee. I've got a Lee & Lee link here. L-I-A-N. L-I-A-N. It says it's not on here. I sure thought I put it in here. I'll have to share it with you then later. Huh. Well, Lee & Lee has a cable that is the closest to that connector that I have found. But their module that they make that can go on their case is for their cases. You would have to take their module and do some cutting to make it work on any case. But in time, this is what we're looking for. Something that works like this. To get, again, that little bitty round plug that goes both ways, USB 3.1C at full speed to the front of a case. So, and I can bring up and show you the manual and show you what the connector looks like, but that's it. I think that's good enough. But everything else I've got on this board, everything I've got in this case, this is the quietest machine I think I've ever built. And the video card I've got in there is not worth talking about because I'll show you some other stuff that's going on that I'm thinking about because, again, this machine is for editing video. But the video card that's in there was my high-end card like 4 or 5 years ago. And I didn't think it'd ever see the light of day again. But I needed it to plug in up here, so I had HDMI out so we could get it up on the screen. Blew all the dust out of it. Man, was it nasty dirty. And it's working. It's quiet. But I am impressed with the Corsair cooler, and I am impressed with the Corsair case. The case from Corsair is affordable. The cooler, I almost went back to Noctua, and I told you about the MSI motherboard. I think that motherboard is expensive, and it's not a bang for the buck motherboard, but I'm impressed with it. One thing I don't like about the motherboard is the white stencil. It's a silver, so that silver stencil, silver, gray, white, with that white print, it makes it, for me, really hard to read. Really hard. I kept going back and forth figuring out where things were, but everything's made logically the way they put it together. Another thing I didn't like was the USB 3.1 connectors. Let's go over to that board for just a minute. If we can go down to camera number 4, see if I can show you that view. I don't know if I can get all the way over on the edge. One connector is like laying down parallel to the board, which means it comes out of the side, and another one goes perpendicular to the board, which is the one I used because it was easy to get to. The connectors are on this back edge. No, we don't get a good view of them. I got too many cables in there. No, we're not going to be able to see it. Let me just keep scrolling up. Power cables. There's our liquid cooling. I've never done liquid cooling, but this is the liquid cooling Ray Morris used. Oh, that reminds me about the memory. I've got the Corsair Vengeance DDR4 running at DDR4 3200, but it is not. It's running at default.
Which is?
I think it was 2133, which is curious because comparing the Gigabyte and the MSI motherboard, when I configured Luz on her Gigabyte board, I had to run the XMP setting to make it run successfully. It Windows would keep crashing if I ran it with the no default settings. With the MSI, it's the complete opposite. With the MSI, I've got 4 BIOS updates. With the Gigabyte, I've had, I believe, 2 BIOS updates. But with the MSI, do not, I repeat, do not right now try to go in there and set that memory any higher than the default lowest speed. If you do, the machine won't boot. And then you have to go to a little jumper that's right up next to the video card underneath it. 10 seconds to reset the BIOS, pull it off, and then you can get back in. I remember the Asus, when we were setting those up, if you set it to something it didn't like, it would shut down and it would come back on and reset itself. The MSI, it just will not come on, which is extremely frustrating. There's even a setting in the BIOS I can take and show you, and it says try it. I tried a couple of those try it settings, and after the third time of having to short the BIOS out, I said, I'm not trying any more of that. Excuse me. Wow, frog in my throat. So what I'm saying is, if you're going to build with the MSI titanium, it's the MSI X370 titanium motherboard. Let me go to the specs on that. Go to the build sheet, AMD Ryzen build specs, and, oh, thank you. Okay, this is AMD Ryzen 1800X with the AMD X370 chipset and the MSI X370 X-Power Gaming Titanium motherboard. I'm going to hold down the control key. We'll bring that tab up. And what I'm going to do is, real quick, we'll check service. We're going to check for BIOS updates. Yeah, it's still the same. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 BIOS updates. They deal with the memory compatibility and the AGISA code for the CPU, so that they now support the Ryzen 5. But with all these updates to improve system compatibility for memory, don't mess with trying to go any faster than what it is, or Windows will give you grief. Oh, excuse me, the computer will give you grief. Keep it in the default, and it'll run fine. But I've got my hot swap. Let me shrink this down just a minute. And I didn't care for the silver MSI wallpaper for the titanium motherboard, so I went with an older generation MSI. I like the red. It's the dragon thing they were doing. But I'm going to click down here in the bottom right-hand corner, and I'm going to show you that I have hot swap. And right there's a drive. I can eject that drive. Now, let me see if I can zoom in on that for you. No, I haven't configured that yet. Give me just a second. Let's do magnify. Okay, let me go back down here to the bar and I'll show you again. Right there. Safely remove hardware and eject media right there. I have hot swap. There is a setting in the BIOS that it is enabled that I can turn on or off hot swap. Hot swap is off by default. The Gigabyte board does not have that setting right now. A BIOS update can solve that. Will they deal with that? Apparently that's not a big issue right now, but for me it's a big deal. Now, I have configured that particular drive to show you hot swap works, but that drive is not going to be hot swapped because it's set as an internal drive, because C drive is an NVMe drive, so I'm using 2 drives. So I'm in that issue like we were talking about what Joe said, cloning, imaging, backup. It's more important now to image a drive than it is just to clone a drive, because if I clone C, I still don't have my data drive of D, and the reason for that, I've moved my email to be on that second drive. When I install applications, they will go from that second drive, but when I actually install the applications, everything by default will be to C. But anything I download will go to that secondary drive. So when I bring up Explorer, I've got 2 drives, and I just have to remember when I look at this computer that those 2 drives are system drives, the C drive, and the letter this gave after the default of the burner is E. So I had to run the profile manager set up so that I pointed my profile for email to that second drive. And you do the same thing with the browser. By default, it'll download everything to C. Just point it, it'll download to the other drive. Because I want to keep that M.2 as clean as possible with the minimum amount of stuff, just the applications that run. Well, that reminds me of something else. Did you guys see the deal from Newegg Sunday? This came through like around 2:30. I saw it around 9 a.m. that morning. There was a, I'll call it a 1 terabyte, a 960 gig Samsung SSD, not the Pro version, but a Samsung SSD for $200. Anybody see that? Nobody saw that? Did you see that? Did you take advantage of it? You did. Yeah, it was 960 gigs. Exactly, that's what I said. And when I saw it, I said, you know, I ought to get me one of those. I clicked buy, sold out. Couldn't believe it. At 9 a.m. I mean, I was a little late eating breakfast that morning, but I couldn't believe it. Sold out. They sent the message around 2 o'clock. I saw it at 9 a.m. But for $200, a 960 gig Samsung SSD, wow. But anyway, that's what I'll probably put in here when I start doing video editing. I'll use that as a scratch drive. So any editing I do, see if I can speed up the process. But right now, there's just the 2 drives. But the nice thing about this motherboard, I'm back to doing what we used to do with the FX boards, not the last generation, but the previous generation, where I said, I want to get as many SATA ports on a motherboard as I can. I've got that on the MSI board. I'm not having to cannibalize. In other words, a hot swap rack that gives me 3 drives, they're all functional. And I've still got places internally because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe I've got 6 on that board. I'd have to go back and take a look at the book. In fact, let's just do that right quick. Let's go to the manual. We'll go to English, Chinese, English, which is number 2. I'll download it. Right now, that's probably going to go to the C drive because I have not changed that setting yet. So once it's downloaded, it's only 3.9 megs. I will tell it to extract. Remove the check mark because I don't need an extra folder open. There's the folder. Now let's go take a look at it. I've got my PDF program installed, Foxit. Always use Foxit. I like Foxit. And don't need to register. Let's see if we can find SATA right quick. Comes with SATA, 6 SATA cables, which was kind of neat. Usually the Gigabyte you get 4 SATA cables. So let's find another way here we can get a little quicker. The SATA drive. One thing I wish they would do is MSI, it'd be nice if they put a large picture of the motherboard, the way Gigabyte does. But then on the other hand, I wish Gigabyte would put in a lot of the details that MSI does. So, you know, you get used to one way or another. I want to get past installing SATA drives. I want to show the SATA connectors. That's what I'm looking for. So, SATA 1, 6 gigabit connectors, page 36. Let's see if we can go to that. Okay. They're all laying down on the edge, 246. 246. On the back end and up here on the front end, I've got a USB 3.0 and a USB 3.0. This USB 3.0 on the bottom is laying down. It's going to be hard to use. I may or may not with a front bay, but I'm not going to add a front bay device to the case until I can see if I can get USB 3.1C to the front of the case. And if you notice, it's logically laid out. SATA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Gigabyte, you've got to be looking at that, and it's stenciled correctly, but it's kind of cattywampus. The numbers are not sequential like you'd expect, but here they are. But I've got 246. So right now I've got access to 3 on the front, 4. I've got access to 2 more drives if I chose to put them internally, which is nice. So I've got 2 fans on top, which is running the radiator. I've got 2 fans on the front, and I've got 1 fan on the rear. Now, something else I'm thinking about as a video card for this machine. I ran across something, and if it hadn't been for the stuff we do up here, I never would have found this. So I'm going to go back over to BuildOrBuy, and I'm going to show you a video card that I never would have known about had it not have been for what we do. Did y'all know that Corsair and MSI, you know, MSI is working with Fantech on a case. Well, Corsair and MSI are working together on a video card. Kind of interesting. Check this out. It's the only place I've found it, and I've even tried looking at other places, and I haven't had any luck. This is an article on digital trends. This is an MSI video card, and it starts with one of the GeForce 1080 Ti video cards, and it's got a cooler on it. So I could take that video card, put it in this machine, take the rear fan out, and that radiator with that fan ought to fit. I've already built a watch. I might as well go a little further and build a Rolex. It's called a Corsair Hydro GTX 1080 Ti. Now there's a link here that'll take us straight into that site, but I can go back to BuildOrBuy, and I can click on the link right below number 39, Corsair Hydro GTX 1080 Ti liquid cooled graphics card. And again, this is a closed system. I like closed system. Keeps it simple. It adds about $100 to the cost of the card, which for a cooler is not bad. It says find a retailer. Well, I couldn't find anybody that had it. I'm sure anybody can get it. That's always a good old saying. But I believe that's a 120 millimeter fan. Yep, 120 millimeter. And I guess it can probably be controlled by their Corsair program, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, that's what it looks like. I had looked at the Aorus, which is Gigabyte, which was a special card. I had looked at also an EVGA. I believe it was an EVGA 1080 Ti FTW, because they have 9 sensors, 3 fans on it. Whereas this has got, and this, oh, by the way, this is also supposed to be, I believe they said 50% cooler than the stock Founders Edition. You know, how do you know that you try something? And that little program they run, I think I've got it installed on here where I can get to it easy. MSI even has their own version of CPU ID running. It's just a skin, that's all it is. Nope, don't have an icon on the desktop, thought it did. Let me see, what is that program called? It's Corsair something. Corsair Link? There it is, Corsair Link. Run Corsair Link. And I've set it to Fahrenheit to show me what's going on with the system. It says you need to reboot your PC. I don't want to do that right now. I may in a minute when I go into the BIOS if we do that. Let's see if I can zoom back in. I didn't set the, that's the first time that's kicked up. We'll magnify again. Shows the video card I've got, shows the temperature it's running, which is a little warm right now. It's been running 100 degrees. It's running 130. Shows the temperature of some of the fans I've got in here on the motherboard. Shows the processor at a minimal load. It's interesting, it shows the SSD at 95 degrees and the hard drive, which is a Western Digital 2 terabyte. It took me 3 days to get a 2 terabyte drive clean. You know when you use a drive, you say, oh, I'll just set it aside and I'll mess with it later. You do that very many times, you're going to end up with a lot of little drives, and one day you got to say, I got to do something about it. Well, this is one of those times I finally said, I got to do something about it. So I started taking a 2 terabyte drive that had lots of our things that we do, that we discuss, MP4 files, that sort of things. I won't go into details. And I had to move them. So I put a little here, put a little there, put a little there, somewhere else. Found I had some audio on the drive, had to put it somewhere else. 3 days, not consistent, but you know, you set it, you forget it, you come back and do some more. So anyway, that's the drive that's in that machine, because I can't see justifying buying the 2 terabyte drive. For a hard drive in this machine, this is for downloading programs, this is for storing email. The drive that will be used for video will probably be a 4 or 5 terabyte. I think a 5 terabyte is the best bang for the buck out of a 4 or 5 or 6, because they're running at $50 a terabyte. But if I can get my hands on an SSD for a scratch drive for actually working with the video, that's in the back of my mind. But you know, save 50 bucks here, save 25 bucks there. It's like the power supply. I originally was going to put a 750, couldn't get it. I was going to put an 850. Then by the time I was ready to order the 850, the 750 came around, and the 850 was out of stock. So I said, okay, we'll put in a 750. And then after I put in the 750, I said, well, I didn't realize I had another power type. I guess I should have done that. But it is what it is. It's going to stay that way because I need to see what I can do on a 750 watt, which is what we recommend. I'm not planning on putting anything else on that PCI Express. So anyway, back to the controller. It shows the system I've got, which is the H110i. Shows the memory I've got, and even reads the the SPD, which is kind of cool. Neat little program. I had a time looking for this Corsair link, trying to find it to download it, but I guess it's doing its job. That's what it looks like. So I'm going to close that down. Now, something else I'm going to show you, and I always say make sure everything works. I'm going to hold down the start key, pause break, and we're going to bring up Device Manager, and I've got one little phantom. Well, kiss my grits. You know, it's funny. We talk about things that work and things that don't work. We get up here to show you something, and things have completely changed. This is one of those situations. I had in this machine one of the universal serial bus controllers that said, there's something here that I don't understand, and I hadn't had time to fully research to go through the ID and to see who it was. I kind of think it had something to do with the program we were just talking about, the Corsair link. But anyway, it showed up in here that said something wasn't working. And that's what I was going to show you. Now everything's working. So I'm curious, that program said reboot. I wonder if I reboot, if I come back and if it comes up again and says, hello, I'm the one that's saying I'm not working. I don't know. But all the drivers were put in according to the motherboard CD except for one. And I'm going to tell you about it. There's some really nice audio in here, but I've read about some people that have some trouble with the audio. Now, I haven't had a chance to get into this, but there is a device called Nahimic Audio. If anybody uses an MSI motherboard and your audio on your motherboard is important, I would strongly suggest be circumspect of the Nahimic Audio application. From what I have read, it does something where it mutes the audio to a point where you almost can't hear it if you're trying to drive that audio out to an external system. So don't install that. What I have read was just install the Realtek driver, which is what I've done. I did not install the Nahimic Audio. I don't want anything that mutes the audio. Now, if I want better audio in this machine, I'll put a separate external audio interface through the USB port, probably something from Focusrite. But for editing video, the audio on board will do what I need. And that reminds me, Pat, if anybody's interested in Pat's piano, you can find it on YouTube. She's going to be at Cavatori's this next month in May. And if you want to know her schedule in May, go to Cavatori's, click on the link, and check the schedule, and it'll show you when she's playing, what weekends. And she's also going to be playing in June, and in June is when we're going to do our next video, because I need a Saturday to do that on. And her May schedule is either going to be Wednesday or a Tuesday. Wednesday or Tuesday doesn't work for me to be up here and do this. So I appreciated her checking that. I'll go to the top, go to build specs.
Excuse me, did you mean Jim or John?
I mean John Lum, I'm sorry. I said Jim, didn't I?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I was thinking John, I was looking at Jim because I had just talked about Pat. So, you know, how long have we known each other, Jim? Oh, we've known each other a little bit longer than that. How long do you think? Where's the other mic at for a second? I want to ask Jim a second. How long have we known each other, Jim?
I'd say at least 12 years, maybe 15.
Okay, we've known each other for 12 years, and how long have I known that Pat played the piano?
Probably about 3,
3 years?
maybe less.
Maybe 3 years. And I didn't know what we were getting into when we started doing that. And I just think that is so cool. But it's because of BuildOrBuy that we got to go do that. So I thank everybody and appreciate everybody. I don't always get to visit with everybody like I'd like to. I told Mom, I said, you know, it's a funny thing. We're up here for a very short amount of time, but if somebody comes and asks me a question before while we're trying to set up, if everybody asked me a question that only took 1 minute, kind of makes you think. I don't like that, but it's just the way it is. So I'm glad we have this extra time outside of it to go do that. And I'm saying this so, Tom Tyner, if you're listening, I'm going to come see you one of these days. Don't know when. We'll plan it. But one of these days. But I'm glad we get to go do this and videotape Pat. So I hope it helps Cavatori's. And with the email that I saw, with the conversation they had, they tolerate us. I hope in time they will learn to appreciate us. At least right now they accept us. And that's why that first video. Have you guys seen Pat's piano lately? Anybody? Anybody looked at it? I'm going to show you. I'm going to go pick up another tab. I'm going to go to YouTube, YOU2UBE, and I'm going to do a search on YouTube for, I'm going to mute that just a second in case something comes through I don't want to hear, and I'm going to do a search for Pat's, P-A-T apostrophe S, P-I-A-N-O, Pat's Piano. And she normally comes up number 2, but now she's coming up number 1. She has 3 videos. And I'm going to go to Pat's Piano. That's her channel, what's it called? Her channel trailer. And I'm going to click on videos. Right now she has 4 subscribers. But that first video, let me magnify. I should have brought the magnifier up and configured it. Pat's first video has 94 views. Her second video has 41 views. And her third video, My Favorite Things, has 39 views. There's really only 3 ways to find that site right now. Either you know Pat, and you've gone to Google or YouTube to search it, or the link through BuildOrBuy. And I think that's fascinating. But Moon River, Someone Like You, and My Favorite Things. I had hoped to get 2 more videos up this last weekend, but because of taxes and getting this RYZEN built, it was out of my vocabulary. So my goal is I'll have to do double time and try to get 4 videos up. Now, when we did that shoot, as I told Pat, my goal was for whatever she does, I want 6 good videos. So we've got 3 up. If I can get 3 more up, I'm happy with the shoot. If I get more than that, fantastic. Now, when we do the next shoot, if I can get some of the camera angles I'd like, what I would really like is to get each video that we get good on, that we get a good take on, I would like 3 takes on each song. So if we get one song 3 takes, 3, 6, 9, but I don't know we can do that like at Cavatori's. Pat had mentioned about a friend that we might be able to go to her friend's house. My concern is, and I wish Pat was here, was at Cavatori's there's no room to swing a crane for one of the sweeping shots I'd like to get overhead. I can get an up and down shot with the crane, looking over her and spinning around, but I can't get a sweeping side to side, and I would have difficulty with the motion because the crane, even though it has a forward to it, it has a back end that has to be balanced, and we'd have to be out in the aisle. And I also talked to her about doing a live event. I would love to do a live event with Pat. I think it would be really difficult at Cavatori's because of the space that would be required. See, when we run the video switch, it takes 3 computers. 1 computer for the stream, 1 computer to run the switch, and another computer to run the credits. So that would be 1 table. We would have to have occupying that space where the piano's at. We need that much space again in that corner right around the edge, so they'd have to give that area up. Plus, we'd need a hardwired internet connection. So I would love to do a live event there, but I think it would just impose on them too much. But if the chance comes up we can do it, exactly right. And I told Mom, that's the fascinating thing. Who'd have ever thought 3 years ago that we'd have gotten to go and do this? So I hope Cavatori's enjoyed it, because I've got some ideas I want to do that this is just fun. And it shows what we're building a computer for, or what we're buying the computer to do. It is a task, but the end result is what matters. And that is a good example of an end result. So it's something to think about. So, Jim, you tell Pat I said thank you. And this weekend, hopefully a couple of more videos. And keep the bug in the back of her head. Not only are we going to do a recording in June, but I want to do a live event sometime for her. Probably about a 1-hour event, so that way she can sit and play, and whatever goes, because it'll all be live, and we'd be switching as we go. So the cameras need to all be set up, and I just sit down and do it. But we got to have a hardwired internet connection. To verbalize all that in email, this was so much easier. So you told her I said I appreciate it. Now, John Lum, had a question I want to ask you. Let's go back to your specs. Let me zoom back out. Are you still in deliberation with the build process, or are you at the point where you're about ready to make a decision?
Well, based on what we talked about last week, I guess I'm still working on it, but I'm working on it slowly
Okay, I think that's good. I think that's wise.
because I was spending a lot of time and not getting a lot of information online, or getting conflicting information previously. And
I
now
agree. I agree.
Now I'm just, like I said,
Because this is a new animal.
taking it easy.
Do what? What'd you say?
Oh, I said I'm taking it easy on this now. I'm gonna, another month or two, I'll start up and see if I'm not frantic
Well,
to get it done.
The
right
biggest
away.
thing we need are some BIOS updates. Because remember, there's leading, bleeding, cutting, and trailing edge technology. We always said let somebody else do the bleeding. By getting into a RYZEN right now, it's kind of a bleeding edge thing. I'm impressed with a lot of it, but some of the issues we're having are going to get ironed out with BIOS updates. That's going to take time. In one sense, I'm impressed with what Gigabyte has done, but they've only had 2 BIOSes, the original and 1 update. Then on the other hand, I'm impressed with what MSI has done, but what they haven't done, it's taken 4 BIOS updates to get to that point. So it's a mixed bag right now, and I hear ASUS is having problems with BIOSes. So it's a work in progress, and if anybody's going to build a RYZEN, be prepared, because it's not as easy as we've done in the past, but a BIOS update, I think, is going to solve the problems. You just have to be aware of where the limitations are
Right.
until it gets there. But as I said when we started this process, I don't really know what's going to happen with the RYZEN until I build it. I have some expectations and I have some goals because we're going to use this in the work process. But I've read all these things that are just fluff to me until I can see what I can exactly do with it.
It would be nice if all the manufacturers would kind of maybe come to an agreement. Let's not change anything for 3 months until we get all of these problems solved before we start introducing new things that have to be
Fixed.
taken care of when we still haven't gotten the old problems solved.
And that's a really good point, because here we've complained about we need some BIOS updates, but what my understanding is there needs to be closer interaction and integration with AMD, and AMD has been so busy with video cards over the last few years, they forgot what it takes to release new chipsets, new processors, new motherboards that have to come out. So I get that, and I hear that, and I've read that, and I'm seeing what they're talking about. And here AMD has just come out with a regurgitated version of a new video card that I'm kind of like, well, that's on the Polaris. I'm interested in the AMD Vega. It's still coming out. It's supposed to be out, looks like probably May. So they got these, the Polaris chip, the 500's out right now with the mixed bag for the price. But for me, it's all about video processing, the workflow. David, before you run off, the machine you built on the B350 chipset, can we get a mic on David, please? Thanks, Jim. Thank you. Before you run off right quick, how's that machine running?
I haven't seen it. I have not seen it in the last week. I do need to go over and take a look at it.
Okay. So you don't know, you were satisfied when you left it with him?
Yeah, I haven't had any complaints.
You haven't had what?
Any complaints?
No complaints, okay. No complaints is a good thing. It's like one time I hired a painter and I didn't have any complaints from the homeowner until I found out the painter had painted around the pictures and the furnitures on the wall. And that was about 6 months later. So I know how that goes. Some people don't want to impose. I want to hear it. If there's something wrong, I want to know because I want to fix it. Thank you for sharing that, David. Take care and tell your dad we said hi. By the way, how's his speaker system coming? It's coming.
Well, they're having a party over there at his house tomorrow for him to show it off to his friends. So, although he doesn't have the channels in the hardwood flooring that he ripped out in order to place the speaker wire.
Details.
Yeah.
That's cosmetic.
I mean, they're very narrow, and
that's cosmetic.
He doesn't have the putty in there to hide it, but but the speakers are in place. Sounds good.
That's all that matters. If it sounds good, you can make it look good later. Thanks, David. Okay, I'm going to go back over to BuildOrBuy and take a look again at our talking points. If anybody's interested in audio plugins, a couple of talking points at the top. These are not things you find unless you dig for this stuff. Two sites, Plugin Boutique and Audio Deluxe. If you're interested in VST instruments, these are some interesting places to go for plugins because occasionally they do some deals. And a lot of these sites, once you sign up for email, you'll get on the list whenever somebody does a special offer on a price on something. And I mentioned these two because these are two that are doing some deals right now. And one of the deals, we talk about doing audio. Does anybody do audio restoration? Anybody here work with audio very much? There's an interesting article on digital trends. It's in the talking points. You can find it about how to take your records and get them over to the digital format. Well, we've always talked about doing it simply and inexpensively, which the best digital audio editor for the money is the free one, which is by Audacity. That's it. And you can download Audacity direct, or you can get Audacity from Ninite when you download all the other good stuff. And I've talked about Sonic Foundry, who had SoundForge. Sonic Foundry sold that to Sony. Sony has now sold it to Magix. SoundForge is still around. There's also a program called Samplitude, also from Magix. But there's another program from a company called Isotope. And Isotope has a program that is made for doing that kind of work. And if you're really into trying to cleaning up audio, it's worth looking into. Isotope also advertises on Audio Deluxe and I think Plugin Boutique. Sometime there's some deals. In fact, I have a link up on Isotope right now that talks about their new program and the way they do their audio. They've used machine learning technology to go in and look at that file and see what it needs to be cleaned up. There's another program that works as a VST plugin called SoundSoap. I've got a link up on that as well. So if you're interested in audio, we can get more into that in the future. Oh, here's the Lee & Lee I had up and couldn't find a while ago. Number 6, small form factor network, USB 3 motherboard connector revealed, and the Lee & Lee global multimedia I/O ports. I'm going to go into this Lee & Lee connection. I don't know why that didn't come up a while ago. And I'm going to look at the connector, and I'm going to look at the cable. Well, there's supposed to be a picture there. There it is. Okay, here's the connector that goes on the case, but here's the cable. And this picture of the connector may show both. Let me see. Okay, there's the connector. So you got USB 3.1C on one end. You got HDMI and 2 USB 3 ports, and of course your audio and all that good stuff. But more importantly, here's the cable. That's what the cable looks like. That looks a little bit like a SATA cable, but not. Because the SATA cable, when it's at a right angle, it'll have that one corner turned down. Well, this has 2 corners turned down, but it's keyed because it looks like from the picture the 2 bottom keys, left and right, are longer than the 2 upper keys, left and right. So left and right, top to bottom, it's a different kind of key. But that looks like the cable that plugs into the MSI motherboard that also works with the Lee & Lee. And I went looking for that because I'm a big fan of Lee & Lee. That's my favorite case. And a case I bought that I was going to do this with because of the cooler didn't fit, so that's why I built a watch. But that's what the cable connector looks like. So I had to share that with you. So I'm going to go back over to BuildOrBuy. Don't know why I didn't see it a while ago. Too many things going on. And something else we didn't get to last week. Where's Clifford Carley? I want to get a mic on Clifford. Clifford, I didn't get a chance to email you about this, but you sent me some information from the technology you'd gotten into last week about the USB 3 microscope. Do you feel like talking a little bit about that?
Well, what do you want to know?
Well, you sent a link, and you said this was from Oxford Nanopore Mini Ion, a molecular sequencer that can quickly and cheaply determine the sequence of DNA and RNA about the size of a candy bar. It's a USB 3.0 device that uses nanopores.
Yeah, nanopores.
Effectively nanoscale donuts to sequence organic molecular chains, including but not limited to DNA.
Yeah, I found out about this whenever I went to the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference, which is like the last full week in March, and it's focused obviously on stuff that the group here might not be directly interested in. It's planetary science, hardcore planetary science, and so things about Mars and Jupiter and the moons of Saturn and this, that, and the other. And this group might not be interested in a lot of that. But one of the presentations I went to dealt with trying to discover life on other planets, because one of the moons of Jupiter and one of the moons of Saturn have oceans underneath their ice shells. And where you've got liquid water, you've got the possibility of life. So one of the presentations was on setting up the technology to send a probe to one of to these planets to try and figure that out, whether or not there's life on those things. And the presentation in question, she talked about this device that was produced by a company called Oxford Nanopore. And I looked into it. Nanopores are nanoscale holes that you can do an astonishing amount of things with.
So is this something that anybody can buy?
I believe so. I mean, the picture that is on the website here, that device, if you scan down there, Joe,
Scroll down.
yeah, scroll down. You can,
Minion.
you've got some. Yeah, there it is. There's somebody holding it in his hand, so that gives you an idea of how big it is.
Interesting.
And that's a video about a little less than 5 minutes long. You can look at it at home later if you want. That gives
Sure.
you technical details of how the thing works in a simple way. And what it does is the pore in question. I can show you a picture of it if you want. It's there's a Wikipedia website called Nanopore Sequencer. It has a graphical depiction of what the device looks like on the nanoscale.
Huh.
And what it is like a donut that the molecular sequence in question passes through, and as it passes through one point inside that nanopore, the nanopore can detect what particular molecule is passing by it at that moment, and it can sequence what was in the molecule.
Any idea how much this device costs?
No, because I think it's still in somewhat of the development phase. I think she got a hold of a copy of it that was before it, but it's much cheaper than any of the other sequencers that have been available to this point.
Well, I'd imagine. I'm fascinated by it.
And it's a 3.0 device because the volume of the data is so huge that 3.0 is the only thing that can handle it.
Interesting.
And you literally plug it into your laptop computer, and the laptop computer crunches the numbers. And if you want just markers and specific spots on the that you want to check, it can do that like within minutes. But if you want to sequence the entire DNA genome or the entire very long protein chain, it could take up to a couple of days. So you need to have your laptop plugged into power to run a very long-term experiment. And all of this, as I say, is mentioned in the video.
Well, I'm glad to know about it, and I appreciate you sharing it with us, because here's again something we're doing with computers that is just going to be very commonplace, but to me right now is very extraordinary, because it reminds me. You remember back when we were doing desktop publishing, and desktop publishing was a big deal, and we would have gazillions of fonts, and we realized that, oh my gosh, all those fonts would just bring a system to a crawl. So then we created font catalogs, and then we looked at printers that went to 1200 DPI, and now that's all taken for granted.
Right.
And that hasn't been that long ago. And now here we're doing something where we're sequencing DNA on a computer,
Right.
on anybody's computer, literally, with this device that plugs into a USB 3 port.
And one of the sites that I was looking at when I was researching this said that conventional ways to do full DNA sequencing, whenever you send your mouth swab out and $75 to someone to sequence your DNA to see what your family background was, that they're not sequencing the entire genome. They're only sequencing what are called markers, specific spots on the DNA here and there that determine who you are, where you came from, and can pinpoint your ancestors down to individual cities.
This is interesting.
But to sequence the entire genome from top to bottom costs about $10 million and takes like a couple of weeks.
Wow.
With this device, it would cost about $1,000 and can be done in a few days.
Now see, that's pretty wild. That's just pretty wild. Look what technology's doing. Thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that. That is really fascinating. Okay, video cameras. Got to share something else with you. Got a link up on BuildOrBuy about this. I'm not sure which number it is. But can you imagine a camera that can see at night in color? A camera that can see at night in color. Now, we're not going to talk about price, but I believe it's up on Cinescopophilia. And I've got several of their items in here. You can take a look for it. But it's a night vision camera. And from that article, there's a video. From that video, it talks about a comparable camera that it corresponds to. That camera that it corresponds to is made by Canon. I clicked on the link to find out how much that Canon camera costs. Wow. It was about like buying a red camera. A red camera is 50. And that's another interesting thing. I got a link up here on, I believe it's from Extreme Technology from NASA. NASA is going to be using the red camera, and they're going to be able to do 4K from space using a red camera. Now you think about a red camera is about a $50,000 camera just on the base, just the camera itself. Oh, sorry about that. Greg's running the switch. I need to leave it alone. You're doing a good job. I appreciate it. And by the way, if anybody else wants to learn how to run the switch to help us with the meeting, Ben knows how to use it, but that doesn't work when Ben's not here. Lou knows how to use it. Lou's not here. Greg knows how to use it. I appreciate that. There's some other folks I have in mind that I want to get to learn how to use the switch. If anybody's interested, y'all let me know, because it takes all of us to make this work, and I want you to know I appreciate everybody's support. But the biggest thing we've had, as I've always said, chipsets. It's chipsets, chipsets. So we got our new chipsets. And the trade show going on right now, I said if you want to know the technology, follow the trade shows, is NAB. Has anybody been keeping up with NAB? The National Association of Broadcasters? That affects us just as much as CES or any of the others. Okay, right now, as Joe said, 4K. Is it a benefit or is it a feature? Joe's not interested in 4K. 4K is good for one thing, video. Right now, we're doing 4K. In 2 or 3 years, we're going to be doing 8K. Granted, the gamers are doing it first. All these motherboards we buy are all gamer this and gamer that. But 8K is coming to the desktop. Dell has a monitor. We've got a link up. It's been on the past talking points about a Dell monitor. Even AMD is talking about their video cards supporting 4K. 8K is coming. It's coming down the pipeline, and it's coming real soon. And in 2 or 3 years, we're going to have 8K on the desktop. Dell's got a monitor. We've got video cards that are going to be able to do it. Now, why do you want to do 8K? Again, it's all about the video. But how long is it going to be before they start broadcasting 8K? Not everybody's even broadcasting 4K. So, you know, matter of time. Robert?
Just curious, do you still think that Intel may get out of the PC business?
Well, you know, that's an interesting question because last week we learned that Intel gave up the Intel developer forums or developer conference. And I find that extraordinary for Intel to do that because if Intel is giving up the Intel developer forums, it tells me something else is going on that we're not being told. So that is a distinct possibility because the last time somebody started getting out of the PC business, it was IBM. They sold it to Lenovo. So that's a distinct possibility. Now, that's been their bread and butter, but the bread and butter has really been the servers, the high-end chips. It's enough to give me concern.
Well, I'm just curious, if they do that, does that mean that AMD is now the default leader, or is that you thinking Intel is going to sell to somebody like IBM did, and it'll just change the name?
The question is, who would they sell to? What do you think, Joe?
I don't know, but I can't imagine Intel just quitting that business. I can imagine they would sell it to somebody.
Well, I used to work for, last 15 years I was working, a company that was in a very narrow market. Only very few people made RAMs, and so very few people then bought RAM test equipment. And this company, which was in Houston, had essentially 2 products and 2 customers, and those 2 customers were Intel and IBM.
Aha.
And IBM was making RAMs just because they wanted to stay kind of current in the technology. They didn't sell them to anybody. They used them. And after years and years, they finally decided, well, let's just not do this anymore. So, whap, they closed the door. They no longer made RAM, and so this little company lost one of its two customers, and about that same time, for other reasons, they also lost Intel. But it was very significant to me to see that IBM just said, well, let's just not do that anymore. And they walked away.
Wow.
So I'm just wondering, is Intel going to do that same thing? Just seems to me that would be a very strange thing for them to do.
The PC market's still pretty big, even though, and if Intel just walked away from it, yeah, you'd see AMD go crazy. They'd love it. But I think they would probably more sell it than just walk away from it.
Well, they keep saying the desktop is dying because everybody's buying laptops and tablets and whatever.
Well, I hear that, but then when you go looking for motherboards, when all this Ryzen stuff was going on, you could get a motherboard, but then you couldn't get a CPU. Then you could get a CPU, but you couldn't get a motherboard. Somebody's
what I was
buying
hearing
this.
today, so I guess it's time to repeat it, that there is the leading edge,
Yep.
but there is also something called the bleeding edge.
Yep.
And it's obvious to me that today Ryzen is at the bleeding edge.
I think
and
it is.
I've never been in favor of being at the bleeding edge. I'd prefer to be 6 months behind the leading edge.
I agree. And I agree with you there totally. The cutting edge, I'm okay with. And that's, in my opinion, kind of where we're at with the Ryzen, but with what I'm doing, it's kind of exciting. Like I said, I've just built a watch. Everything fit, and everything went together perfect. But if I had to work on that thing or take something apart, I can see where that's going to be a dog to deal with. But so far, the stuff that has worked beautifully. Things that I need to happen are happening. So it's something. Anytime we get wind of something, it's always a flag to me to be mindful of. Now, because of what AMD is doing, Intel has done two things. One, it's made them have to get more aggressive with the pricing. But number two, it's made them change their upgrade strategy, so their next class of processors are going to be coming out a little bit sooner. So we're speeding things up, we're ramping things up. That's another reason AMD, I think, has regurgitated their Polaris video cards, giving them some new names, up the specs on them just a little bit, but it's not quite what this AMD Vega is supposed to be. So I'm holding out on buying a GeForce card because I'm hoping great things are going to happen with the AMD Vega. But when I finally see the full specs, when that drops, then I can make a decision. But in the meantime, I've got 3 backup cards I'm looking at. Corsair's one now that I know about it. I like the idea of the cooler because I'm impressed with this cooler. And I got to show you on number 4. Let's go to camera number 4 right quick. When I first showed you this monitor a while ago, camera number 4, camera. There you go. When I first showed you all that a while ago, that was a white light. That's green right now. I didn't do anything. I called up the application a while ago. I haven't installed any software to make that do that. I haven't told it to do that. I'm not sure how it's doing that. They even talk about how you can change those badges on the front, which those kits aren't available yet. But that light changed. I find that curious that things got a mind of its own. I just had to point it out. How did it happen? I don't know, but I'm gonna look into it. I'm gonna go back over to this computer now. Let's look at talking points. Back on computer number 3. Let's see. We did tune up. Let's see. We had one other person buy a new TV. That was Jim Johnson. Jim, you'd asked me at one time about a cable, and the cable you were looking at, we were talking about HDMI, and the key I look for is an HDMI, but I like the ultra thin. The monoprice brand is one I preferred. One spec we had used was the what's that technology called? The technology that boosts the signal. Redmir.
Redmir?
And you had talked to me about a Redmir versus a Firebrand. I'm not sure about Firebrand, if that is a brand of cable or if it's a technology like. Do you know, what cable did you end up using?
I think it was a brand because they used Redmir in their ad.
Interesting. Are they a thin cable?
Yes. Almost like, well, exactly what you can get from Redmir.
Firebrand HDMI. Firebrand HDMI cables. I must not be looking that up right. Let's go to Amazon. Did you find the cable at Amazon or Newegg?
Neither one. I think I got it, if I'm not mistaken, even through Redmere. But there again, they were talking about two different animals.
Well, let's see. Redmere is a technology, so they're not the only ones that have them. We used a lot of the cables that had Redmere, but the Redmere cables don't like being on each side of the converters, and sometimes they would work, sometimes they didn't, and it became more problematic. So I swapped out and went to a different brand of cable, and these are the ones I use now. They have the silver braid. They're 8 feet long. It's as long as I can go without going Redmere. But I'm using them for the whole system for the video switch and converters, and everything works. My key point on an HDMI cable, I don't want the standard fat cables because HDMI is a very flaky, delicate connector. So I like a thin cable that's very flexible, so when I plug it in, any movement is not going to move the connector itself. Now, stuff you plug in a system and leave it, not as big a deal, but because we move stuff around a lot, and especially on laptops, I don't want to damage that connector, so I like these ultra-thin cables. And I can get ultra-thin cables without the Redmere technology from Monoprice, but they're only good to like 3 feet. The other cable I'm using, the Sanus is the brand. Took me a minute to think of it. It's a Sanus HDMI cable. I'm trying to see if I can get Amazon to come up, but it's not working. Oh, there it is. Let me search Sanus HDMI. Yeah, Sanus. There's an 18 feet. It says super slim. That would have to have, it doesn't say it, but that should have Redmere in it. But here's the 8 feet. That's the cable I use. And that's what they look like. And I've been very pleased with those Sanus HDMI cables. But as anything, we're always looking for something better, something less expensive. But my concern was signal integrity, but small cables that don't put a strain on it. So if your system is up and running and you're happy, I've got a link up on BuildOrBuy, which I thought was timely. And I did this some time ago, back when the majority bought their Samsung TVs. Some individual had put up some special settings for a Samsung TV that was out of review on Amazon, which I found very, very helpful. So there's an article about getting these settings optimized. That's what I'm sharing with you. I've got a couple links here from One American News. Kaspersky is a little upset with Microsoft because Microsoft is making it difficult for third-party programs. And that reminds me, somebody sent me a link about WebRoot. I think that was Jim Fallon. He's already taken off. Does anybody use WebRoot? Does anybody use WebRoot? WebRoot's had some difficulties with some false positives, so they're working on it. There's a workaround, but they're working on it. I don't use WebRoot, so I don't know anything about it. There's a link in here you can do a search on it for. And also, I've got a link up in here. A company in Germany is going to be putting together, and this is again from One American News Network. A company in Germany is going to be putting a print center in, but it's a 3D print center. If you're interested in 3D print technology, read that article. Because did you know that they're now making airplane parts from 3D printers? And there's also an article that talks about, in that article, it talks about making parts for helicopters with a 3D printer. Instead of having 900 parts that they used to have, they now have like 16 parts. That blows my mind. So they're making stuff out of metal, and I forgot the other technology, but this company is putting a print center out in Germany.
Specifically titanium.
Oh, that's titanium.
I'm sorry, not titanium. It's
Titanium or
tungsten.
is it tungsten?
Yeah, tungsten is what they're using to make the jet engine parts out of, because tungsten has a extremely high melting temperature. It's the same as in the conventional light bulbs. You know, the filament. Yeah. The filament gets to a temperature of like 5,000 degrees, and tungsten's 3,000 degrees, and the tungsten's melting temperature is like 6,000 degrees.
Interesting.
And I had a friend who got a job at a company that was experimenting with some of those printers, and one of the early things she did, and they actually let her do it, is she made about a 1 or 2 inch tall Yoda made out of tungsten.
Huh. Fascinating. Let's
I
go back to
understand they're also working with parts in the human body.
parts in the body.
Yes.
I have read about some of that kind of stuff. That's just blows your mind when you think about it.
In some cases, they would make a part, and then when it goes into the body, it starts getting covered with calcium, and effectively turns into a bone.
Wow.
And your body effectively turns it into a bone, which is sort of the purpose of the operation to begin with.
Doesn't that blow your mind?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Another link I've got up from B&H Explorer, they did a live event from NAB. Live video is the deal. So if you're interested in some of the new products that are going on, there's a mini Intel mini PC NUC that's just come out that we don't have time to get into. Maybe we can talk about it some next week. And I got another link from Dwayne, who's I think already taken off. He told us about Gigabyte Bricks. They've come out with a new Gigabyte Bricks, which is like a Intel NUC, small form factor, but it is fanless. So we can talk more about that next week. Let's see. A couple other things I wanted to tell you about. There's the isotope number 13, what the machine learning and RX6 Advanced means for the future of audio repair technology. There's some really neat stuff going on right now, and this is a great time. But since we're short on time and we were slow getting started, I'm just going to say, folks, do you have any more questions today? For those of you that are online, appreciate you watching. Stick with us. We'll be back next week. We'll do a better job. Thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Y'all have a great day. I feel like a one-armed paper hanger with my head cut off.